The most dangerous manipulators never feel aggressive. They feel familiar. You've met them, not as villains, not as threats, but as people who arrive already inside your psychological perimeter. They don't knock. They don't test the door. They behave as if it was always open. And in the first 5 minutes before your conscious mind has organized its defenses, something subtle happens. Your internal posture shifts. Your breathing changes. Your sense of authorship over the interaction weakens just a degree. Not enough to notice. Enough to matter. Manipulation doesn't begin with control. It begins with disorientation. The quiet kind. The kind that feels like social warmth. Most people believe manipulators reveal themselves through dominance, arrogance, or overt pressure. That belief is convenient. It allows you to stay blind to the ones who don't need to push, the ones who let you walk toward them. In the first 5 minutes, a manipulator is not collecting information in the way you imagine. They are not interrogating you. They are watching how quickly you give yourself away, how fast you volunteer context, how eager you are to fill silence, how uncomfortable you become when nothing is demanded of you. They don't ask questions to learn. They ask questions to see what you assume they deserve to know. Notice how early the conversation feels personal, not intimate, personal. There is a difference. Intimacy develops through mutual exposure over time. Premature personal framing is something else. It is an invitation to skip stages, to behave as if trust is already established. Manipulators don't force trust. They presume it, and watch whether you correct the presumption. Most people don't. The first 5 minutes are not about content. They are about tempo. A manipulator subtly accelerates the rhythm of interaction. They speak just fast enough to prevent reflection. They create micro-agreements early, small nods, shared assumptions, light humor that places you on the same side of an implied divide. Not against them, against an absent third party, an idea, a stereotype. People like that. This matters. Alignment without effort creates obligation without consent. Pay attention to how quickly they define the frame of the interaction. Not explicitly, casually, as if naming reality. They describe you before you've described yourself. They summarize your reaction before you've finished having it. They tell you what people usually think and wait to see if you'll step out of the category or quietly accept it. Most people accept it. Manipulation thrives on the human tendency to conserve social energy. Correcting someone costs effort. Letting a mischaracterization slide feels polite. The manipulator notes which one you choose. In the first 5 minutes, they are not trying to win you. They are testing whether you self-edit, whether you soften your edges, whether you explain yourself when nothing was misunderstood, whether you justify neutral choices, whether you laugh a fraction too hard to smooth a moment that didn't need smoothing. A manipulator doesn't need you to like them. They need you to manage their comfort. Watch what happens when there is a pause. A real pause. No phone. No interruption. Just silence. Healthy people let silence exist. Manipulators weaponize it. Not by filling it, but by shaping what fills it inside you. A raised eyebrow. A half smile. A look that implies expectation. You'll feel the urge to respond even though nothing was asked. That urge is data. In those first minutes, notice whether you feel subtly evaluated, but never directly judged. As if you're being placed somewhere on an invisible scale that hasn't been explained to you. Manipulators rarely criticize openly at first. They imply standards. They reference values without declaring them. They let you measure yourself against something vague and then observe how hard you try to meet it. They also mirror selectively. Not your whole self, only the parts that make you more readable. If you show enthusiasm, they echo it just enough to amplify it. If you show restraint, they respect it performatively while probing its limits. What they never mirror is center, calm, non-reactivity, silence that isn't defensive. Those things disrupt their calibration. There is an error almost everyone makes in these early moments. They confuse smoothness with safety. The absence of friction feels like compatibility. But frictionless interactions often mean one person is adapting faster than the other. Manipulators are excellent at making you feel understood without revealing anything that could be understood in return. Ask yourself, not verbally but internally, have they actually shown anything, or only reflected what I've already given? Another sign appears in how they handle minor boundaries, not big ones. Big boundaries come later. In the first 5 minutes, it's about tiny infringements disguised as familiarity. Interrupting just slightly, finishing your sentence with confidence, using your name more than necessary, making a joke at your expense that's too early to be earned, then watching whether you correct it or absorb it. Manipulation is less about power and more about asymmetry. Who is revealed? Who is stable? Who is adjusting? If, after 5 minutes, you feel like you've been on the entire time, articulate, agreeable, responsive, but cannot clearly state who the other person actually is, something has already tilted. You've been performing while they've been observing. This doesn't mean paranoia. It means perception. The body often knows before the mind has language. A faint tightening in the chest. A sense of being slightly ahead of yourself, as if you're responding faster than you're choosing. The mistake is to look for malice. Malice is loud. Manipulation is efficient. The first 5 minutes are not about catching someone in the act. They are about noticing who owns the psychological pace of the room, who is centered, who is adapting, who feels responsible for the interaction working. The manipulator doesn't rush you. They let you rush yourself. And if you miss it, you won't feel harmed. You'll feel connected, understood, slightly off balance in a way you can't justify. That's why it works. This is not about becoming cold or suspicious. It's about recognizing when your internal sovereignty quietly steps aside without being asked. Most people never notice the moment it happens. They only notice later, when disentangling feels harder than it should. That moment is almost always in the first 5 minutes. The inversion begins when you stop trying to protect yourself and start observing the transaction. Most people, once they sense something is off, tense up. They become guarded. They sharpen their skepticism. This feels intelligent. It isn't. Guardedness is still a reaction. It signals that something landed. The manipulator doesn't need access anymore. They already have leverage. Your attention, your internal monitoring, your concern about getting it right. Power does not come from resistance. It comes from non-participation in the wrong game. Here is the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. Manipulators thrive not because they are aggressive, but because others collaborate unconsciously. They rush to explain. They rush to clarify. They rush to restore equilibrium that was never broken. This is where the inversion happens. The moment you stop repairing imaginary tension, the dynamic flips. Watch what occurs when you do less than expected. The manipulator introduces a subtle pressure, an implication, a framing, a premature familiarity, and waits. The average person responds by filling the space. They elaborate, they justify, they soften, they try to align. This confirms the manipulator's hypothesis. You can be moved without force. Now imagine the same move landing on silence. Not cold silence, not performative. Just a pause that isn't apologetic. A breath taken without urgency. A neutral expression that doesn't rush to prove friendliness or intelligence or safety. The manipulator experiences something rare in that moment. Informational starvation. Their calibration stalls. The invisible scale they were placing you on loses reference points. They don't know whether they're ahead, equal, or behind. And uncertainty is the one state they dislike because it forces them to adapt. This is the inversion. You don't confront, you don't expose, you don't accuse. You simply stop volunteering. Notice how quickly they compensate. They'll clarify what they meant. They'll soften the implication. They may add humor to dissolve the tension they assumed you felt. This is revealing. Healthy people don't rush to fix what wasn't broken. Manipulators do, because they feel the loss of control immediately. Another inversion occurs through agreement, not the eager kind, the strategic kind. When a manipulator frames you, you seem like the type who most people either correct defensively or accept politely. Both are reactive. There is a third response. Calm, minimal agreement without emotional investment. Maybe, could be, sometimes, then silence. Agreement without elaboration is destabilizing. It removes the reward. The manipulator expected either compliance or resistance. What they get is ambiguity. They don't know whether they've landed a point or hit empty space. They cannot build momentum. This is important. The goal is not to win the exchange. It is to remove traction. Manipulators rely on micro-feedback, eye contact that reassures, laughter that validates, verbal affirmations that signal safety. When those cues become sparse, not withdrawn, just scarce, the entire interaction slows. They have to reveal more to keep it alive, and revelation is risk. You'll notice this especially in dialogue. Short, dry examples, They say something provocative, lightly framed as a joke. You respond evenly without mirroring the provocation. The air doesn't heat up, it cools. They push for alignment against an absent third party. You don't disagree. You don't agree. You acknowledge and let it pass. No bond forms. They ask a question that invites disclosure. You answer accurately but incompletely. No story, no context, just the fact. Each time, the manipulator has to decide whether to push harder or retreat. Either choice exposes them. There is a common fear here that this posture is rude, cold, or antisocial. That fear is part of the conditioning manipulators exploit. Social smoothness is treated as moral virtue. Disruption feels like aggression, but calm non-reaction is neither. It is simply sovereignty. Watch what happens when the manipulator escalates slightly to regain footing. Perhaps a sharper comment, a more personal probe, a subtle challenge to your status or competence. This is not an attack. It's a test to see if pressure produces compliance. Most people fold here. They defend, they explain, they prove. The inversion response is stillness, not indifference, presence. You register the move without absorbing it. You don't harden. You don't perform humility. You don't perform dominance. You let the comment land and sit, unanswered for a beat longer than comfort allows. Silence here is not absence, it is weight. In that pause, the manipulator feels exposed. They have created a tension they now must resolve because you didn't. They may walk it back. They may laugh. They may shift topics. Whatever they do, they are now reacting to you. This is where many misunderstand power. They think it comes from clever words or psychological tricks. It doesn't. It comes from the ability to withhold reaction when reaction is expected, not because you're hiding, but because nothing was taken from you. Another inversion happens internally. You stop monitoring yourself through their eyes. You stop asking, how am I being perceived? And return to, what am I perceiving? This shift is subtle but decisive. Manipulators sense it instantly. They feel when they are no longer the reference point. Once that happens, they may attempt to reassert dominance through intensity, faster speech, stronger opinions, emotional emphasis, or through charm, compliments, validation, shared vulnerability. Both are bids for re-entry. You don't reject them. You receive them without leaning forward. This posture does something counterintuitive. It makes genuine connection possible while blocking exploitation. Healthy people relax around it. Manipulators don't. They either overperform or disengage. Both outcomes give you clarity without confrontation. The inversion is complete when you realize this. You don't need to identify a manipulator to be safe from manipulation. You only need to stop abandoning your internal position. When you remain centered, manipulation becomes inefficient. It requires effort. It demands exposure. Most manipulators choose easier terrain. This is not about becoming unreadable or aloof. It's about becoming unavailable for unconscious negotiation. You don't bargain with your posture. You don't trade comfort for approval. You don't rush to stabilize interactions that aren't yours to stabilize. In that state, the power dynamic reverses quietly. You are no longer the one being assessed. You are the one watching how others handle not being catered to. Some will meet you there. Others will drift away. Both outcomes are clean. The world is full of people who feel powerful only when someone else is adjusting. The moment no one is, they lose interest. That's not a loss. It's information. What remains after technique is identity. If this were only about spotting manipulators and neutralizing dynamics, it would collapse into another shallow form of vigilance. Useful, perhaps, but brittle. Power that depends on constant monitoring is still reactive. The deeper shift happens when you understand why certain moves ever worked on you, and why, at some point, they stop landing at all. This requires turning toward the part most people avoid, the shadow. Not the theatrical version, the quiet one. The part of you that wants to be seen as reasonable, as generous, as intelligent, as easy to work with. The part that learned early that smoothness buys safety, that approval reduces friction, that being agreeable keeps the room calm. None of this is weakness, it is adaptation. But adaptation becomes a liability when it goes unexamined. Manipulation hurts only where there is something to protect. Notice which comments sting, which implications hook you, which silences make you restless. These are not random. They point directly to unfinished negotiations inside you. The manipulator doesn't create these openings. They locate them. They press lightly, the way one presses a bruise to see if it's still tender. This is why some accusations burn and others evaporate. If someone calls you selfish and it slides off, it's because it doesn't threaten your self-image. If they call you cold and you rush to explain, it's because warmth is part of how you've earned legitimacy. The reaction reveals the attachment. People who are secure do not defend their identity. They inhabit it. The transition from adult to sovereign is not about becoming harder. It's about becoming less conditional. As long as your internal balance depends on being correctly perceived, you are in a courtroom you didn't choose, arguing a case no one formally brought. Manipulators sense this instantly. They don't need to accuse you. They only need to suggest that a verdict is pending. The sovereign position is different. It is not arrogance. It is not detachment. It is the felt sense that you are not on trial. This is why silence becomes natural rather than strategic. You're not withholding to gain leverage. There is simply nothing urgent to prove. You respond when there is something true to say, not when pressure appears. This changes the entire emotional economy of interaction. Here is the paradox. The more you integrate your shadow, the less dark psychology matters. When you accept your capacity for selfishness, accusations of selfishness lose their grip. When you acknowledge your desire for control, power games become visible rather than seductive. When you stop pretending to be harmless, you no longer need to demonstrate it. This is what people mean, often clumsily, when they say confidence. But confidence is too clean a word. What actually repels manipulation is self-recognition, a familiarity with your own motives that leaves little room for others to define them for you. Consider the child, the adult, and the sovereign. The child reacts. They seek approval reflexively. They feel exposed when misunderstood and rush to correct it. The adult manages. They set boundaries. They apply techniques. They regulate their responses. This is progress. Necessary progress. The sovereign does something quieter. They allow misinterpretation to exist, not because they don't care, but because they understand something most never internalize. Being misread is not the same as being diminished. Only the ego equates the two. Manipulators rely on ego sensitivity, not ego in the sense of pride, but ego as identity maintenance, the need to keep the self-image intact in real time. The sovereign lets the image wobble without chasing it. This is deeply unsettling to anyone who depends on external feedback to orient themselves. There is also grief here. It's rarely mentioned. When you stop reacting, some relationships thin out. Conversations lose their intensity. Certain people lose interest. This can feel like loss, especially if much of your social life was built around responsiveness, emotional labor, or being the one who made things work. But what you lose is not connection. It is performance. What remains is slower, quieter, and far more durable. Interactions where no one is scanning for advantage, where silence doesn't imply danger, where disagreement doesn't threaten belonging. These are rare not because they're difficult, but because they require something most avoid: standing without props. The final integration is this: you stop categorizing people as manipulators or not. You stop diagnosing. You stop labeling. You simply notice how interactions feel in your body when you are not abandoning yourself. When you are centered, certain behaviors stand out without effort. The subtle push, the premature closeness, the implied hierarchy. You don't flinch. You don't counter. You register. And because you are not hooked, the behavior either escalates into clarity or dissolves. This is the real safeguard. Not vigilance, but groundedness. The manipulator needs motion, needs adjustment, needs you to lean. When you don't, there is nothing to work with. Not because you are closed, but because you are whole. The challenge then is not behavioral. It is existential. Can you tolerate not being immediately understood? Can you let someone project without correcting them? Can you remain present when the old urge to explain rises and let it pass? This is not passivity. It is authorship. A simple challenge then, not a habit, a posture. The next time you feel the impulse to clarify something that wasn't questioned, pause. Not dramatically, just long enough to notice the impulse. Ask yourself silently whether silence would actually cost you anything real. Often it won't. And when you stop paying unnecessary social taxes, something unexpected happens. Your words gain weight. Your presence gains density. People either meet you there or move on. Both outcomes are honest. If this resonates with the part of you that is tired of managing rooms you never agreed to manage, You already know what changes.